up, y'all? What's up, Jade? What's up, David?
Hey, how's it going?
Good, man. How y'all doing?
Hanging in there.
It's not like I haven't already asked you this question, so I'm just doing this for all the thousands of people that are watching this.
Exactly.
The 10 people who are watching this.
We understand our status quo.
You understand our status quo. But welcome to the Film Roundtable, which is what I hope today will be is just an intimate conversation between us, who I don't get to see you guys enough. I don't see you guys at all anymore. Just that you guys are off making films together, and I keep getting left behind. So this was the only way I could see you since 2013.
You know what I realized was, I think either yesterday, like this past Monday, or next Monday is like 8 years to the day since we started shooting Saints.
Wow.
Crazy. Before we get into it, we try to the Film Roundtable basically came out of this idea of trying to rethink this whole virtual film conversation platform, and so we're just trying to do something different, and one of the things that really ignited it was just this whole COVID tragedy, really. Some of us are now calling it COVID violence because that's what it feels like. So what we try to do every session is take a moment of silence for those who have lost their lives. Today, close to over 541,000 people have lost their lives, and since our last session, 106,000. So that's insane. And also, just back to back, we're also renegotiating not even renegotiating, we're just coming to a realization that there's some other things happening in our country and our world that we really need to wrestle with. So what we try to do is, number one, take a moment of silence for folks who have lost their lives to COVID, but we also want to take a moment of silence for all of our Black, Brown, First Nations folks who have also lost their body, their spirit, their mind, their culture, their sense of being to state-sponsored violence, whether it be at the hands of the police or through genocide, through transatlantic slave trade. We really want to take about 30 seconds just to sort of think about them and just let our ancestors know that they're on our minds, and know that we stand on the shoulders of giants. That's the reason why we can have this conversation today. So let's just take about 30 seconds to do that. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nah.
Thank you.
All good. All good. That's why we do this.
Indeed.
Moments to reflect,
I sometimes am asked what are the most memorable moments from your filmmaking career, and they're always the ones where you're not doing anything. It's always the ones where you're on set waiting for something, you have a time to just think about something else. Yeah. And those are the ones that stick with you.
Yeah, man. I know when we're making, I'm in another place.
Mm-hmm. Moments that puncture that bubble and allow you to remember the world that you're in, that you're making them within. That really, those are the ones that I'll carry with me.
That's it. I mean, I think we talked a little bit over the weekend, just to be totally transparent with everybody on here. So I'm hoping that we can bring some of that energy back. We were having more than anything, we were just reflecting on so many things. It wasn't even about specific details, but it was just kind of about, which I think would be fun, but just kind of reflecting on, we met in 2012, right? Yeah. And yeah, 2012 officially. And, I know personally as a cinematographer, as a storyteller, like something happened to me on that film, on Ink and Body Saints. You know, it changed everything for me. You know, my whole concept of self, my concept as a things that I wanted to achieve as a cinematographer, I was able to really approach and execute on that film. And part of the reason why I felt so free to do that is because, man, David, you created an environment that allowed us to feel really free to follow the story and really make a contribution, you know, and that early in our career, it felt tremendous, you know. But I also want to remind, you know, folks on here, and this, hopefully we can start a conversation about this, but like, I think the one person that's probably missing from this conversation right now is Malgosia, but you know, the four of us, for the sake of this conversation, the three of us, it was like, I mean, there was nothing left behind. You know what I mean? It was not. It was everything was in equal parts. You know, everything was in equal parts. And so, let's talk about that. Let's talk about, you know what I mean? Like, especially you, David. I mean, you curated the whole event, so it's not. You know, it wasn't like somebody told you. You went out and you looked, and you. I know you and Jade had already had a relationship, but you knew each other. But you went out and you looked, and you curated the situation so that you could have the film that you made.
It was designed that way. You know, the original draft of the script was like 60 or 70 pages, and it was pretty slim because I wanted it to be a movie where everyone could bring something to the table. Like, where I wasn't like saying, here's the story we're telling, here's how we're going to tell it. I was like, here's the structure, and here's like what I want out of it, but what else can we bring into this that will make it something memorable? And the script did get longer by the time we shot it, because I realized it's sometimes hard to get financing, at least at that stage in my life, for like a 60-page script. But that, you know, philosophy was maintained, and Jade was there from the beginning when it was like $100,000 movie, just because we did know each other. But when I, you know, started looking for my other collaborators, one thing I do is I always just trust other people. And Brad, you had just worked with Jay and Lars on Mother of George, and they showed me some of your work from that. And then I'd seen Pariah at that point, and I was like watching a lot of everything I could that I could find that you'd shot. And something I realized then that is, you know, true now, and is still true when I'm like meeting new collaborators, is like, I could look at your work and I was like, I love what you're doing. I love like how dark you let your images go. I could talk about the technical side of it all day long and about how exciting that was. But then it was like, what Jay and Lars suggested was like, you guys are going to get along. Like, you are similar people. And we met up at a restaurant, and I don't remember what restaurant it was. Some restaurant in New York. It was a vegan restaurant. Yeah, me and you and James, my producer, and it was definitely like we just vibed. You know, we were on the same page temperamentally, and we had like this. There was like that spiritual click that you always look for in your collaborators, and that's what I sort of thrive on. You know, because you can look at someone's work and know that they're talented, know that they're skilled, know that there's all that technical acumen that will make your movie look good or sound good, or, you know, the performances will work. But if you don't have that more spiritual connection, then things are going to go askew. And I'm sure we've all had those experiences too. Like, sometimes something, it just doesn't click, and you're like, you can force it, you can kind of work around it, but the best collaborations are the ones where you have that connection. And with Malgosia too, like, that was, she and I had met, we had my short film Pioneer was at Sundance with a short film that she had designed, and it was the same deal there. It was like we were communicating in fairy tale language. Like, it was definitely like she felt like the right person for it, not because the short film with anything to do with what we were going to make with Ain't Nobody Saints, but just like she had that vibe, and that's what I'm always looking for.
Yeah, and I remember when you first sent me the script, because for those who don't know, David and I had known each other for a couple years before. I guess.
Yeah,
2
about
years, I think.
3 or 4
We made
years.
like a tiny little budget movie together that, David edited and did sound for, and I was like acting in it. It was very totally, that's how we met. But I remember when you sent me the script, and it was at that time there was, Casey wasn't attached and Rooney wasn't attached, and it was just very small. And as soon as I read it, I knew it was something special. But I knew it was special because it was coming from you, because I knew the person who was at the helm of it. And there's just so much heart there, and everything, every project that we've done together, there's always something that somewhere I can find myself. And I think that's something that you bring that's so special, is that for your collaborators, they can always find a piece of themselves in some way. It is open a little bit to some interpretation somewhere where you can find a piece of yourself. And, personally, I had a story that I found in the Bloody Saints with my own parents, and that was so profound for me. And you were so open and willing to let me sort of explore what that world was for me. And it was just, I remember being so scared to be. Remember at one point the movie almost fell apart when we were in prep. There's always those movies.
Oh, yeah.
For all young filmmakers, this will happen at some point where you think the plug will get pulled, and it feels like life is about to like stop, and you're just like, no, this is the movie. It's like we knew. It's like I knew. It's like it can't. This is the one. This is the movie, and it was so scary, but it didn't. The plug was not pulled, and we got to finish. But I remember that feeling so profoundly, like just being so scared that the movie was going to fall apart. Because I just knew that we were onto something, like collaboratively, just as in this group of filmmakers who had been brought together. We were on this journey, and it would have been so sad if it had just been like cut short.
Right. What was that, since you guys had already had like earlier conversations? What were, you know what I mean? Like you could read Saints and it could be like really obvious what it is. You know,
Yeah.
Because there is an idyllic version of how you design that film, Jade. You know what I mean? I guess in my mind, and then there's like the version where you kind of embrace that, and then you bend it. Like, what were you envisioning when you, like, what were some of the things you guys were talking about? What were you envisioning to make it not that
It's so far away. I'm like trying to remember.
I haven't seen the movie in 7 years, so I'm like,
oh,
I was just looking at pictures.
But here's what I remember talking about. I remember talking about how the movie is not set in any particular place and time. Well, it's set in a very particular place. It was set in Texas. It says that at the very beginning, but it's not set in any particular time. And we are evoking, a certain era of the 1970s with, certain illusions that the movie has. Obviously Badlands was like, the whole idea of the movie was like, what if we made an entire movie that took place like 10 minutes after Badlands ended, right, and just slowed everything down? Like that's the idea of the movie. But beyond that, it was like, how much further back can we reach from that? And what sort of, I use this word already, you talk about Magosia, but like, how can we treat this like a fairy tale? It's like, we were dealing with archetypes. The whole movie was dealing with archetypes, and that was the intent. But I like the idea of like taking archetypes and really digging into the mythological depictions of them. And again, treating it like a fairy tale that is unstuck in time, to use a phrase from Slaughterhouse-Five that I've just always wanted to use in everything. And so our conversations were like, how far can we push it? I think that in all of our movies, it's often, how far can we push it?
It's always about the cars. It always comes down to at some point where we have to make the decision. We're like, well, we're deciding to use these cars, and these cars are, that's where we always sort of make that choice. But I do think we are always interested in sort of a timeless aspect of storytelling where it won't age, and it has this feeling where you can kind of set yourself in the story, where that story can exist today. It's not something that only existed in 1970s. Like you can still see that story happening in 2020 somewhere in Texas.
We definitely, like, I mean, when you get real specific, like with cars, you're like, yeah, there's a truck in that movie from 1985. That's like, I think, the newest thing in there. And we're like looking at vehicles from like 1987, and like those for some reason don't feel right.
Right.
And like the cop cars are from the 60s, and it's like none of that matters. Like the years don't matter. It's more like the 1985 truck look like? Why does that feel right in this world? How can that communicate with a wardrobe that is pulled from the Great Depression? I remember when we have like these inserts of like newspaper articles, it was like real important to never show the dates, never show any like world events. And that's not to say that those things aren't important or contextually that they matter to stories like this, but in this particular vein of storytelling, I was like, I want to stay away from that. And I've pretty much done that with all my movies except for Old Man the Gun, where I was like very purposefully going so far in the opposite direction that I time-stamped everything. So like the characters go on a date, and you just put a giant supersized font timestamp on the, like, October 4th, 1981, at 2:05 a.m. It's like we put everything on there and made it as located in time and space as possible, just to try something completely different. But with most of the films we've made, it's definitely been like, how vague can we get? And with that, vagueness, you're able to process the emotion, process the information in a slightly different way. And it doesn't, I like the aesthetics of period pieces. I love going time traveling when you're making movies, but I don't want that to ever be unless the story demands it, I don't want it to be a distraction.
Yeah.
And I know I'll make movies someday where you need to know where and when this took place. You need to know how the world was when this story existed. But thus far, the films that we've made have not mandated that.
Right.
Yeah, it's always a little bit more about the emotional intention, and trying not to get too bogged down in the period element. But and even I think about what we're doing now with Peter Pan. It's like, we're not, it's still, even though we're set obviously in a time period, it still has the same sort of emotional quality in some ways to the other work that we've done. But it is
yeah, we're having fun picking out what cars they drive in Neverland. What you're
anything. It could be anything. We won't say too much. We'll have to wait.
But there's like, Jay, I say it all the time. I mean, I'm like a big proponent for myself and everybody else about, like, where are you in the story? Folks always ask me, like, what's the first thing you do when you read a script? It's like, first thing I have to do is like find myself in the story,
Yeah.
And to some it might be clear where my story is in Mother George, but I had my reasoning why Ain't the Body Saints made sense to me. You know what I mean? There's like there's a sense of like romanticism I have around Great Depression era renegade stories, and it's not just the whole rebel lovers on the run thing that's kind of not real. It that does exist in the sort of zeitgeist of like Hollywood image making storytelling model. That's very romantic, but obviously doesn't never plays out the way that it plays out in the movies. But there is a sense of like egalitarianism and radical progressive thinking that that happened, post Great Depression, during the Great Depression, that really resonates with me. And I always felt like the kids in Ain't the Body Saints were like the grandchildren of that, those folks, you know what I mean? It was like Woody Guthrie's grandchildren, or, you know what I mean? Like there's something,
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's where I was like, and that, it was like, I didn't see myself per se, but I saw a period that means a lot to me politically, socially, artistically. There's a lot of sound resonance, Jean Valjean's photograph, you know what I mean? Like all of it from that period really stands out to me and really touches me, because you see people struggling and you see people really overcoming that struggle through pushing back. But I say all to say that, like, to you specifically, David, I sent you a song recently that like really was very Texas to me. I don't know why. Like I've been to Houston before I worked with you, but Houston's a different thing.
It's a different thing. Yeah.
It's a different thing. So, until we didn't even shoot in Texas. We did shoot some in Texas, but we shot most of movies for folks that don't know. But you're very Texas, and there's something I'm curious to, like, I just would love for, I think it's really important for young people to hear like how you embed that in all of your films. Like all of your films, as Jay said, they have like this way about them. One of them, the things that I love about them is that they're always from a child's perspective. There's always that desire. I see you always moving your hand that going lower, or we talked about child's perspective many times on Ain't Nobody Saints, even though it doesn't seem quite obvious that that's what the perspective of the film is, but you talk a lot about that. But where is that Texas thing? What is it about your process that is filtered through that? Am I making it up, or is it there? I'm just curious about your origin and storytelling. You know, it's really, to me, it's very palpable. You know,
I'm trying to reconcile with that myself these days, because I'm still living in Texas right now, and I'm like, what, what do I love about this place? Like, why do I like? There's so much about Texas I don't love at all. Like, there's a lot that is like frustrating about it, and I could, count the number of things I do like probably on far fewer fingers than the things I don't like. But those things that I like are enough to keep me here, and part of it is family, easy things like that, easy things like the comfort of just having my family close and having the history that we've got here. My parents my mom being from here and everything. But I think there's something about just especially like specifically in North Texas where I live, like, in Dallas, 3 hours north of Austin, where it's like goes from like hill country to plains, just like the way that landscape gradually cast a spell over me. And that sounds like romantic, but that's literally what it was. Like, I just really liked the way Texas felt, specifically in the winter, which is what people don't think about. Like, I hate summer. And so like those are things that like are strange reasons to have ties to places, but I really am inspired by the environment that I find myself in. And I'm like, I live in the city. I don't like live out on a farm or anything by that means, but you can drive like 5 minutes and just all of a sudden be out in the countryside and just see it all stretching out. And that is evocative to me, and feel that you get that feeling of possibility. And that wasn't always something that I was drawn to, but as I got older, like in my 20s, when I lost the drive to like live in New York or live in LA at all costs, which, that was my goal, was to get out of Texas and go there. And I found like the pace that is instilled in you by a landscape like the one that I'm surrounded by to be something that I could come back to. It was like a well that I could draw from. And then you start reading about Texas history and everything just gets really bad really fast. And you really like start being like, man, what does it say about me that I like this place? Like, but that goes for all of America and probably all the world. So
a slowness to Texas. And there's like that slowness. It doesn't have that pace in New York or Los Angeles. And I always, when I think of your work, there's a patience in your work, like that slowness of
it's definitely that.
Not being afraid to let it breathe and the moment breathe.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely like a pace here, and I think you get that in a lot of like in the South in general. Texas isn't the South; we're in the Southwest. Like, people get mad at me if we ever say that we're in the South, but it's definitely like there's like that you do get that slower pace. Everything's less accelerated, and I vibe with that in a really meaningful way, and that matches my own disposition. I talk quickly, but that's about the only fast thing that occurs in my life. I meander, I procrastinate, I like meditate, I smell the flowers. I definitely like am a more contemplative. I like to take a more contemplative approach to life. I'm not like saying like I'm a monk by any means, or I'm not like a trying to like make myself sound more spiritual than I am, but I just slow things down a lot. And that is something that I find here, especially now when I'm like Zooming with friends in New York or even in LA sometimes. Jade, you've got a nice, quiet little oasis there, but like you just, I remember like living in LA and just hearing the traffic going by outside my apartment and just constantly. And like, here, I'm just like, I can go outside and like, I went running this morning and I just don't see anybody. And that's kind of nice. I like that degree of solitude, and that comes through in my work. I think that's there.
Yeah.
I haven't made a movie that's avoided that yet.
Yeah. They're never crowded, right? I don't know. If I look at your past works, never crowded with people and lots of, there's always sort of like some space. There is always space. And if I think about
I'll watch like the Safdie brothers movies, which I love, and like I'm like, man, how can I like there's a part of me that has that energy. There is a part of me, and I'm like, could I make a movie with that? And I can't. Like it's just I tried, and I just couldn't do it. Like it wasn't going to work because I just don't have it in me, and so that's part of like why I make movies in Texas, why like I live in Texas, and at the same time, like it's something I am, like I said earlier, to begin with this tangent on Texas, like it's something I'm reckoning with all the time. Where I'm like, I talked to Augustine about moving, like we talked about this over the weekend too. Like there are places in the world we feel like living right now, and sometimes they're not where we are in this particular moment in time. And it's like, what does it mean to just like pick up and leave? And it's mattering less to me now. Like there was a period around when I made Ain't the Body Saints where like, if you looked at my bio, it just said David Lowery is a filmmaker from Texas. And that was it. And now I'm like, I don't know if that's important anymore.
Right. Well, that's my whole image of Jade is, I never know what Jade is. Right?
Yeah.
Like Jade.
I'm Canadian.
Jade's whole life story is out of here. Like Jade is on the move. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And like that was always between you and your sister Jade. I'm always just like, man, they're so interesting. Like I can never, number one, I'm always asking, where's Jade? What's Jade's doing? She's like, with Yorgis. So she's somewhere doing something. But it's also what I know about you, Jade, is like, that's a reflection of your family too. You guys are on the move because so you can connect. My interpretation of it is like you guys are on the move or settling or thinking, or your story is so thick, and I think it's part of it is you guys like finding what works, and when it doesn't work, you make a move, and that's that kind of. But I say all that to say too that that's an interesting life story, and how do you collect all of that, all those experiences you have from LA, Montreal, whatever, like how do you collect all those life, like where is that, how does that inspire design? How does that inspire like creating spaces for characters that you ultimately, folks never assume that production designers have relationships with character, but you can't even design a space unless you know who the character is, you know what I mean?
I'm living with all of them all the time. I feel sometimes like
some
multiple personality disorder.
Right.
You do have to become, it sounds cheesy, but you become one with your characters. And sometimes it's funny because I'll finish a movie and then I'll be on like 2 movies later down the road and I'll see something in a store, like in a thrift store, and I'll be like, oh, this would have been perfect for like, the Rooney and Ain't the Body Saints, because they stay with me like for so long, and you see these items and you really have to, it's so like that, which is a reason why I always like to shop a little bit myself when I'm designing, because sometimes you don't know it until you see something. And when you're building a world and you're creating stuff from scratch, you have to dig deeper into the well to figure out what those things are that are that those make up those characters and their lives. But when you're able to scout locations and you're looking, that's so much part of that experience, is when you walk into a space and you can feel it, if we're looking for a house and you just kind of know. And that's why it's always so sad when you're looking for a location, you can't find it, because you're just like, it's just not here yet. Right, and you're just, when you and the DP and the DP and the director walk into a space and you all look at each other and you're like, it's like, So it could be and that becomes a challenge for the designer when you don't quite find that place, but you know what it's supposed to be and you have to settle, kind of have to find a location, you sort of settle on it. You never want to say settle, but you make a conscious decision. Eventually you have to pick a location to move forward. And then it's about figuring out who these characters are. And I guess I always just build, it's like you said, I'm always trying to connect with the story on a personal level. And I feel like if I can do that, then I'll always be able to bring more to the film. I'll be able to leave more, blood, sweat, and tears if I'm emotionally connected. And I mean, Ain't the Body Saints is personally, obviously there was a big, it was very connected to my life. I mean, my father went to jail when I was a kid, and my mother to me was very much like Rooney. I felt this like kinship with her, and she was so strong. And the idea that, it didn't matter how much you love somebody. And like, I always see that. My mom's actually never seen the movie, but I remember reading the script and you would make changes and I would be like, wait, like one of my long emails I write, David, I've read the main. I always write those emails and I'm always like, oh, do I send it? Do I send it? But I always send it. Now over the years, I don't get as nervous when I send you one of my long emails with notes of something. But that's how I remember the first time I sent you a long email with notes, I was like so nervous because you're really putting yourself out there. You're putting yourself out there because you're so afraid. It's like this, you have these ideas and it's not your script, and then you want to bring something, you want to give, and you want to be honest with yourself always when you're telling a story, and you want to be honest with your collaborators. But it can be this, and I'm sure Bradford and Dave, you guys have felt this. It can be scary to kind of put yourself out there sometimes when you might not, you think maybe your idea might be a little different, but the only way to push the boundaries and to really be true to yourself is to give that much of yourself away and to sort of say like, I'm not sure, and what about this? And then it's like something comes from it, whether you don't land immediately on the same idea, you grow together as collaborators when you're able to have those conversations, when you're able to actually talk about something you might not agree with and think about it, you uncover a little bit more of the story and a little bit more of the characters. So that's why I always find negative feedback so important, because it's not really negative. It's just like, you're just lifting up some more of the dirt and you're like uncovering more information underneath. It's like, an archaeological dig, and it's just like, you're all in it together and you're trying to like piece it together. So I find, and David just allows for so much of that you can kind of say like, wait, I don't know. And
I count on it, I count on it, because I think one thing that I'm sure there are directors out there I know there are, who sit down and like, here's how this is going to work. Like, this is what the shot leads to this. This is going to look like this. Here's our color scheme here. I've got a lot of that in my head. And then I leave a lot of it to be discovered with my team, because I want everyone to invest themselves. But I also have to always acknowledge these things don't just like, you're not just regurgitating a movie. It's like you're pulling it out. And sometimes it gets stuck. And sometimes, like, in my attempt to get it out in a way that makes sense, things will get left behind. I'll forget about things. I'll overlook things. And that's when I really count on people raising their hand and saying, like, Jade, when you sent me that email, I got to remember that. And I was like, I got to make sure that it's not so much of a case of like not letting you down, because I never want to let my collaborators down, but I want to make sure that I don't overlook what mattered so much to you that prompted you to send me a 3-page email about your family history. And that stuff, like, that's important. It's important, like, to get, I mean, that's why that email meant so much to me. And the ones you sent me for Green Knight have been like really helpful, because I can forget about things. I can stop seeing the forest for the trees really easily. It's something that happens a lot, especially when we make as many movies in the forests as we do. Yes. Little pun there, dad joke, but
you don't hear them though.
Lifted out of Pete's Dragon. I remember. I mean,
yeah, it's definitely a requirement, like, for me to hear from my collaborators, like, what matters to them, how do they see themselves in the story, what's allowing them to become invested in it, and that in turn helps me get more invested in it. It helps me focus, and then throughout the process, like, it doesn't, like we were saying, it doesn't stop with, when we wrap principal photography. It doesn't stop when when we're in the edit, like, until the movie's out of our hands and is on whatever, in theaters or on DVD or whatever. It's like, I want everyone to remain invested in it, and I want them to help me like realize it, because I need it. I depend upon it. And so, like, that's why I'll send rough cuts, like, that's why I'll be like, what do you think? Like, and I'm always hoping for the best, but I know that, like, there are things that I have not figured out. And I'm, I wish I could edit movies quickly, but it takes me a while, because you're always just trying to like find ways to get all that stuff in there.
Right. And I'll skip over, I'm going to come to go, well, maybe we'll come, maybe we won't. But I think, like, hearing the meta of how you guys collaborate, and like actually bearing witness to it, but then only bearing witness to it in real time, being with you, but then reflecting on it as I see the movies you guys have made together. I'm wondering, like, has making bigger films, I won't even say Pete's Dragon, let's talk about Peter Pan, because it's like the most, you haven't made it yet, but you hope, inshallah, you will make it. but I'm curious to see, that's an 8-year period between working together. You have one movie not together. Jay, you've been off doing other films with other incredible directors. You guys now on Peter Pan, this gigantic piece of like, you know, it's part of the, again, it's something that's like top of the zeitgeist. Like, where do you, how have bigger films allowed you to be, what's the question I want to ask? What have bigger films added to your process? You know what I mean? Like if let's say it's a deficit of time, meaning it gives Jay more time to give you more notes on things, or it gives you more time to give Jade notes on things, or you know what I mean? Like the old dream of like being able to build a set and it doesn't work and you tear it down and rebuild it. Like, are we making it all up, or is that like now how is that sort of those things that I know? I've been on the bigger films too. Like I know what happens. Like how has that format, that space contributed to what's essentially two filmmakers that really make very intimate films? When you make it in the studio system, how does the studio system like help? Does it not help, or does it just make things?
Interesting. Like it's hard not to think back to Pete's Dragon because it was our first real jump into the studio system, and we did it together. And we were both, you know, I mean, I can speak for David, but I remember just feeling like, oh my God, what are we doing here? And the pressure was really, there was no outside pressure that I felt from the studio. It was more just pressure on myself to deliver. I mean, for David, you know, I didn't want to disappoint him because he had given me this chance and vouched for me to do this film. And that was that feeling where it used to be on indie movies where you're like, oh, well, this is what our budget is, so we're going to make it work. When you have all the money, it's a different stress. It's a different set of anxieties, because now it's like, well, you have everything. So you've got to make it work. And how do you make it the best it can possibly be? And how do you stay true to yourself and to your vision while also working within the studio system? And that's something I think we were very lucky to have Jim Whitaker and Adam Borba as our producers, because they didn't just hire a director and go like, oh yeah, you're an indie director, now let's make our version of what we want for studio film. They hired David because they saw in him as the writer and the director, a storyteller that could bring something to Pete's Dragon or to Peter Pan. And they let David really, they support him and let him sort of create the story that he wants to create. And what I think working on these big movies is more just, sometimes it's like we have these conversations, David and I will be like, isn't it just me, but where's all the money going? And if we had $5 million, can we just do this? Like, what is happening? Because no matter what, I'll tell you, for people who haven't done big movies, there's still a lot of no. You can't go there, you can't do this. And it's interesting when you come from an indie world where you're used to like, we'll scrap it together, we'll make it work, we're gonna figure it out, and we'll just go there with 3 people and we're gonna like steal this shot, we'll get on the train, we'll do this. You can't do that when you're such a big studio film. You're just like your footprint's so big. But it's also in this other weird way where you start to learn that you can demand stuff. So it's like this weird balance where it's like, no, you can't do that. They're kids. We can't go too far. And then it's like, oh, this forest, you want to build a road? We'll chop down these trees. No problem. We'll drop the crane on the river. It's totally fine. So it's like this weird thing where we're still learning like what our boundaries are, and watching David grow and being more demanding as a director and saying like, this is what I want, has been really fun and amazing. And I'm always like, now I like to sit back when the line producer comes into my office and is like, Jade, these locations, they're too far. And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. David wants it. You're not going to change his mind. I've done 5 movies with the guy. It's like, I know when he's sold on something, that's it. And it's been, even for me, I've had to, I mean, even on this last one, on Peter Pan, we're not finished. There was moments where I saw the switch and I was like, I was adapting. I was like a little behind, where I was like, oh no, wait, we're going to fight more. We're going to like, we're saying no to that. We're not going to like, just make that work. Like, this is the direction. We're asking for everything. We're leaving nothing on the table. We're just going to go for it. And I had to adapt to that, which is sometimes when you're working with someone for so long and you're like, wait, what's changing? We're doing something different now. It's like, I had to check myself and be like, I must, fight harder for this, for David, So it's always, I think the thing for me is always like, with Peter Pan, like you said, top of the zeitgeist, and like, I don't really care. It's not like I care about Disney. It's always me. It's like wanting to make sure that I'm facilitating David's vision. Like, that doesn't matter to me. Like the studio or the big movie, it's like, I just want, it's always like, I want to make the movie that David wants to make, the movie that we want to make. Cause it's like, I feel like our brains are always working. So I feel like I see it, but then I'm always wondering, am I pushing myself far enough? When you're on a small movie, you know your limitations to get together of what you can do. And on a bigger movie, when you're building every set and it's just a warehouse and you can do whatever, it's always, that's the emotional burden. Like, am I going far enough? Can I go further? But then also like, don't just push further because you can. Don't go crazy just because. So it's like finding that balance. Like, don't just do something huge and crazy because you can do it. It's always story, story, story. What does the story need? What does it demand? So it's like, that's always the journey. You know, when you have all the money in the world, doesn't mean you have to make a huge, crazy set.
I mean,
And it's also,
You know?
the cautionary tale is Heaven's Gate, right? We don't.
Yeah.
Hey, but I want to make her. Hey, listen, I thought, man, that's the dream though. The dream is in the dream to go make Heaven's Gate and just.
we talked about that like on Ain't
Yeah,
the Saying
we
on prep all the time. Like we were like, people would be like, so what does this movie look like? And we're like, Heaven's Gate. And about halfway through the shoot, I was like, we only have 28 days. This is a terrible idea. This is a terrible model to set for ourselves. And then it happened again on Green Knight. I don't know if you've seen that 7-hour Russian War and Peace from the 60s.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that was like a huge reference point for us. And we're like, halfway through that shoot, I was like, why did we choose that one? They had 3 years to make that.
Think big.
They had the Russian military.
Why we always do that, and then we're on Peter Pan. We keep thinking about Master and Commander, and we're like, they spent much time building that boat, and it's like even when you have a big movie budget, you're like, you never have enough time. It's crazy. Maybe on Star Wars.
It so quickly reveals itself. And Brad, I don't know if this was your experience, but like you have more days to stress about all the same things. That's basically what it comes down to. You just have more days to stress about the same problems.
Yeah.
And one thing that like what Jade was saying about you are able to build everything if you have a higher budget, or not everything, but a lot of things. And so when you're doing that, you really, you don't have those, the ceilings that you normally would hit. You're like, well, we could take this wall off to get the camera through. That's fine. But you start having to really think about the stuff we were talking about with Ain't the Body Saints, which is like, what matters to me about this? Like, what matters to me about the way we're telling the story? And that is easy to lose sight of when you start like playing with your toys, you know? And one thing we did on Pete's Dragon that I think was really important was, you know, we built the house that the family lives in. And that was, you know, not a huge build, but for us, that was the biggest set we'd ever built. And we were like, we're going to build a 2-story house on stage. It's not going to have flyaway walls. It's not going to have moving partitions. It's just going to be a house. And it's going to be wired like a house. And we shoot it like it's a location, because that's going to get us that intimacy. Those restrictions are going to get us that intimacy that we want to bring to the story, because ultimately we're not making a movie that's like a fantasy movie about mythical creatures. We're making a movie about a kid and his best friend and the family that he finds that you know, gives him something he needs in his life. And like those things require a different approach. We don't need to fly a technoplane through a wall just because we can.
Yeah.
So that type of choice is the type of thing that like, it's important to like, not on Peter Pan, we're having rotating sets. So like, we're not obviously like immune to the abilities to do cool things like that, because they serve their purpose. But it's important to remember what it is that brought us to make this movie on a personal level, on an emotional level, on all the levels that money is arbitrary to.
Yeah.
That's. I was as you were talking, I was thinking about, and I'm losing my train of thought here. Oh no, I'm not actually. I'm not losing my train. It's still directly connected to this, but no, this is it's one of those things that I not plan on saying, but like I think the thing that we have to, when we're making smaller movies together and we respect failure, you know what I mean? Like we respect this proposal with the universe, with our creator, with whoever we are collaborating with beyond our own bodies, that we I'm going to try something, but if I don't succeed at it or I miss something it's okay. You know what I mean? Because we look at those spaces as spaces to create. We look at those as safe spaces. So we're fine with, and ultimately for us in those spaces, we consider ourselves artists all the time, you know, where we're making bigger films, sometimes we're more it's more managerial, you know, managing resources, managing people's expectations, budget, money, whatever. But I think that, you know, this is nothing to, maybe this will spark a small conversation, but I think that's the thing that we lose, man. We lose this sense of respecting failure. We so caught up in providing people exactly what they want. Like for instance, when you're making smaller films, the only existential element you think about when you're making a film is the audience. There's no middle person. There's no person mitigating you in the audience. It's just like every decision we made on Saints was about, when people come see this film, what are they gonna feel? And we focused on that. You know what I mean?
And we want to give them.
What we want to give them. Exactly. But when we're making studio films, we actually have to take that thing, even though it's ours, has your DNA all smothered on top of it. We have to hand that to somebody else, right? And then they have to go make sense of it. Number one, when you give it to them, they have to go make sense of it for somebody else as well. And so, you know, we lose that connection or that kind of that scholarship essentially that we have with our audiences who are making smaller films, where the analysis and the criticism is part of the beloved journey. You know what I mean? Where we're making bigger films, the scholarship is out the window because we're thinking about the box office or whatever it may be. Even though I'm not assuming that, like, the thing we're celebrating about you two on this call is that we love the fact that your process making Eighth Body Saints is so resonant in your process of making Peter Pan or making Peach Dragon, you know?
Yeah.
But that sense of like making Heaven's Gate, where it's just like, I don't care. Like this has to make sense for this particular thing. And if we fail at it, that's to be celebrated too. And that's where we learn and that's where we get better the next time. And, you know, I think we have to, especially our generation, we have to stay focused on that. If nobody else is telling us that they're investing in talent, we have to invest in ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Ourselves, like I'm investing in myself. Nobody else is going to invest in me at this moment. I need to invest in myself, and that some of that is just accepting that, you know, I have many ideas going to every film I do in there, and I can tell you from scene to scene where stuff didn't work and where I felt like we achieved something. And the stuff where it didn't work is the lesson for me, is the achievement. The stuff where we failed was the achievement, because now I know, you know, I can.
Yeah, I think you're so right. The idea of accepting failure. I mean, I think that it's a struggle for all artists, really. I mean, I think it's like we were talking about over the weekend. There's every movie we've made, we can go and look at the things that drive us crazy that nobody else will notice. Right. You know, like that. I noticed that if I told you, David, some things, you'd be like, what? Or, you know, because I pointed out and asked you to paint it out. Malgosia would notice something that drives her crazy that I don't see. You know, it's like we're so obsessed in our little details, but that's what makes us, you know, we're striving for not perfection, because I don't think perfection is the goal, but we're just striving to sort of tell a story that we feel is what we set out to do, right? You know, at the end of the day, we set out to do something. Then when I peel down the pictures on my office every time I finish a movie, that's kind of my moment of Zen. You know, it's that moment where you're like, you look at all the images you put up and you're like, okay, I did it. This is what I set out to do. This is what I did. I feel good. And then, or sometimes, you know, there's one set that you're pulling down. You're like, oh, I failed miserably. Let me take those off really quickly. But it's like you set out. And I remember when we got on Saints, when you showed up and you got settled into your office, Brad, I remember like walking in one day and you had photos everywhere. And I was like, oh shit, I got to step up my game. Like Bradford is like really, he's coming with like so many amazing references. I was like, went in my office. I was like, shit. Because I'm used to always like having, you know, my office is the office with like all the pictures, but you were this next level in your office. You really like brought it. Intimidated.
No. That's obsessive. That's an obsessive disorder.
All the time about like, and
You froze for one
The
second.
stake change. They fluctuate from one movie to the next. Cause like I'm always like in a state. You what?
Wait,
Did I freeze?
yeah, I
Okay.
missed the beginning.
You back.
I'm back.
You back.
I was saying that failure is like a big part of my process, and it doesn't matter what scale the movie is at. It's always going to be embedded in there. And if the stakes change from one project to the next based on all sorts of mitigating circumstances, be they budget or personnel or who is involved or who I'm worried about letting down this time. But I always like the unfortunate and fortunate thing about this art form that we with is that it also is. And so even on Ain't the Body Saints, where the budget was microscopic, it was big to me. Am I freezing up here? I just got a message saying my internet.
You're good now. Yeah.
You good.
I might have to give you guys a tour of my house and go to a better spot. But I like one thing I'm always concerned about is like, yes, I do find I take solace in the fact that I have been able to fail and learn from those failures. That is an achievement. And every failure I make, whether it's in film or in life or wherever, you know, I try to, that's something to learn from, and that's a good thing. It's a gain. But when you're making a movie, you're also using 90% of the time, you're using someone else's money, and you are creating something for other people. And you wonder how much personal failure can you foist upon somebody else, whether it's a financier of your movie or the audience going to see it. And that's like a balance that I'm just like always cognizant of, because I like the fact that my movies have scars on them. Like, you know, you can see the rough patches. You can see where we ran out of time. Sometimes not everyone's gonna be able to see it, but it's there. You can see the days where, like on Green Knight, you'll watch that, and I'm 90% sure you'll be able to tell which days I was sick, because I was like deathly ill on that movie, and I bet you'll be able to tell. And because it's there, it's embedded in the movie, and most people won't be able to, but I think some people will. And that is stuff that, like, I like that it's in the movie. I like that it's embedded in there, but I also always want to make sure that I'm not going to be letting people down. That's a big deal to me too. It's like I take this responsibility very seriously, and I'm not just making movies to try things out. I'm an experimenter. Experimenting is a big part of who I am as a filmmaker, and curiosity and trying to push things and just testing things. But I also know that, like, ultimately I can't just like show off a failed experiment. It has to work on some degree. And so trying to like find that balance is, I know that not every movie is going to be perfect. That's never going to be the case. But like, whether it's like a tiny indie movie or a big studio movie, like finding that right balance between those failures and the things that are actually working, and making sure that one isn't overtaking the other. Or that I'm fetishizing something, you know, like that's the other thing, is like, I don't want this movie to be, any given movie to be like a testament to something that I learned, you know. The movie that needs to be for me and not for everybody else.
Yeah. And then learning from those failures, and then taking that knowledge with you on the next one. And just failures, it's so important to fail so that you can grow. I mean, there's no growth without some kind of disappointment or failure. You know, I think I learned something on every movie. And usually it's, you know, it's where I fail is where I learn. I don't learn when I, you know, hit it out of the park and it's like amazing. I'm not learning on those that much as I am where I failed somewhere, where even if it's not noticeable to everybody else, if I feel it, that's where I'm really learning and trying to make mental notes of what that experience was, and how to adapt and how to grow in the next one. But it's so important. And it is interesting because you work with someone so much, and if you work with the same person, growing alongside them, and figuring out, you know, when I go and work with other people, when I come back and work with David, I'm always just so like appreciative. Just so like, why don't I just, you know, it's just so nice to work with your friends and with someone that you trust. It's just that feeling of knowing that you're going to put in 100% and just trusting what will come out at the other end, and just having that there's so much, I mean, I'm just so grateful for that feeling of knowing like I'm going to work so hard in this thing. And it's like, I trust in David so much that I just know that it'll be something I'll be proud of on the other side. And that's sort of, you don't always know that, you know, sometimes you sign up on a movie and you don't know, you have no idea until it comes out.
Right.
I'm always, even it's like, I'm just proud of our collaboration in the end. It's not even so much about the movie. But
Brad, I'm wondering, like, this is something I think about. Maybe this is like, did I freeze up again?
No, you're good.
Okay. This, like, when we were first talking about Saints 8 years ago, and we were talking about, you know, we were sitting there just going through the movie, shot listing it, and talking about visual influences. And we both, I remember, talked about at some point, like, our movie's worth it. Like,
yeah,
we were both talking about, like, how fine art can be a way to express these things that is more limited in terms of audience, but also you're using the same tool set, you're using the same, a lot of the same, you know, a creative, you know, part of your brain to like get these ideas out into a visual medium. And that's something I still think about sometimes, like, is like all of this effort, like, and money and all of that stuff, and the failures that get projected on screen for audiences all around the world, like, is it irresponsible to do that? I don't think it is, but I do check myself a lot, and I do think about the other avenues in which I could communicate this way, and I have to weigh like those a lot just to remind myself why it is that, like, I engage with all the things that I engage with in the art and commerce of filmmaking.
right.
And I wonder if that's still, I remember, you know, you were describing to me this installation you wanted to do that sounded amazing. And I was just like, everything we're talking about is all right there. Like, that's it. And I wonder if you still, if that tension still exists in your life.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like, yeah, I mean, making films is, put like this. I definitely know that I guess the way I wrestle with it is like, on a human level, politically, I know this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, this is not where I'm going to find the justice that I want, you know, the justice that I want for my children, the justice that I want for my community, the justice I want for humanity. Like, I think, yes, there was a moment where, you know, in my development, I watched films that I think that changed everything. You know what I mean? Like, I think The Hour of the Furnace changed everything. You know, I think The Battle of Chile changed everything. I think Black Girl changed everything. I think Killer Sheep changed everything. Yes, I think Do the Right Thing changed everything. You know what I mean? I think there are those blips in time where cinema does rise to the occasion, but I think on many levels, I think it is indulgent. You know what I mean? I do struggle with that in my own flesh and blood body, 2 feet on the ground. You know, it's hard for me to reconcile, you know, what's happening outside my door and the very privileged life we have as filmmakers, asking people to give us hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars to try some stuff and fail. Like, that doesn't work. That's not pragmatic. That's not prudent to me. And and some of that goes beyond me. That's like my grandparents talking to me. That's less my parents. I think my parents are probably more of our spirit, but my grandparents really left an impression on me with regards to that. But then there's a spiritual part of me that just knows that I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. You know what I mean? Like, I'm here doing this because this is what the Most High wants me to be doing, you know, and I cannot run from that. And I try all the time. Every year I make a promise to myself that I'm done with this, you know. And then I end up somewhere on the other side of the planet with the most incredible human beings I'm ever gonna meet, you know what I mean? And it's like, that never gets old, you know? It's like, just when you thought you met a community of people that you're never gonna be separated from, you're gonna continue to make movies with, the real thing is that you probably won't. And those who can repeat it can continue to make films like you two, to repeat it. That's like a blessing. I just like, that's a blessing. But that's not the case for most of us who are using film to work out whatever trauma, whatever thing we're working out. So like, you know, spiritually, I have to, and these days, honestly, I'm leaning more towards, I'm trying to commit 100% of my creative normal self, quotidian self to the spiritual part. You know what I mean? That I'm not going to question it anymore. I'm not going to try to come up with ways to pivot away or try to get out of it. Like, I gotta fulfill the thing that I've been commanded to do. And let me say this though, I don't think it's like some divine order. I don't think that God cares about films. Like, I don't believe that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think the Most High has blessed this and said, oh, this is the one that's going to change humanity. Like, no way, no how. But I know that like I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And the one thing that I'm trying to do now is just really reflect on how my children see me invested in this thing. You know what I mean? Like, how they reflect on it. So what I want to try to do is, if I want to show them anything, it's not that I walk out every day and I'm so happy, I feel so good to be a filmmaker and what a great life and look at this thing and we're doing, what filmmakers, a lot of filmmakers do. That's not what I'm trying to show them. What I am trying to show them is the conflict. I want them to see the conflict. Mm-hmm. I want them to see me engaged in my spiritual practice as a way to deflect all of the things in my art practice that don't jive with me. But I also want to show them that filmmaking is part of my spiritual practice, because what it's allowing me to do is take what's in my mind's eye, all the things that I've gone through as a child of this universe, but also all of the things that my ancestors have had to struggle through, whether it be here or in another cosmos. Like, I'm projecting that through a piece of glass that then inverts it and turns it into beams and rays of light, and then project that into the world. And that's spiritual. That is a spirited experience that cannot be described by mankind's lack of vocabulary. Like, these are things that we have been gifted to show the world, that I too have a struggle. I too have a story. I too have a mother. I too have a father. I also love children. You know what I mean? This is what cinema is allowing us to do. It's to take those very pixelated, abstract things and turn them into physical objects that are still abstract, and we have to fill in the gaps with persistence of vision and all those things. But yeah, I just really want to show my children that, like, I go make movies, but I'm also humbled by God. You know what I'm saying? I go make movies, I'm also humbled by my ancestors. I go make movies and I have a good time, but I'm trying to strike the balance between the gift I've been given, the responsibility I've been given, and knowing that it's a responsibility and a gift. Like, because I was not the kid that woke up and felt entitled to be a filmmaker, or I know some, hey, you guys are like filmmakers. You know what I mean? Like, I was supposed to be a mortician. So I'm always like struggling to, you know what I mean? So
that's kind of a common thread in the three of us. I feel like, I don't think three of us grew up like thinking like we're meant to be filmmakers or felt any of that entitlement. We sort of, grew up in different, I didn't go to like any film schools, and David, I know you didn't, but it's like we found a path through a different way. And I think is always important. I always want to express that to young filmmakers, especially who might be listening, that, film schools and AFI and NYU, Columbia, whatever, are the only path forward to making movies. And, I think a lot of, if I'm just speaking to young filmmakers who are wondering how, it's like, I always think of David as an amazing example of someone who like didn't have that training, but it's like he's a storyteller. And like as a storyteller, he found a way to tell stories. It's like you just keep going, and it's like, so I don't think you don't need to do that. You don't have to go on that path. And I always just feel the same with when I'm talking to production designers who, young kids who want to be production designers. You don't have to like go to design school. You have to do these things, like learn how to read a script and learn how to like see the story in your mind. Like you need to connect to that mind's eye that Bradford you're talking about. If you can connect to that mind's eye and you can see the story, and then you can understand how to start to tell that story in the different ways that film language works. Like that's the first knowledge. That's the first type of film school you need, is like, can you actually read a script and see it in your mind and be able to understand what you want to like say, or can you write a script and see what you want to say? But you don't have to go to film school for that stuff. That's what I think anyways.
Well, and I was gonna say, I think too, piggybacking on that, Jade, I think that, 1,000 years ago, in some, Ethiopian Orthodox church off Lake Tana, there was like a young monk child who was reading from the Dead Sea Scrolls, you know what I mean? Like massive Orthodox Bible, and was reading, but at night, and then there was a flicker, you know what I mean? There was a candle that was flickering around the Bible, and he turns and he looks, and on the wall, he sees himself, but he also sees like a manifestation of what he or she is reading, and that is not NYU, that's not UCLA, that's not USC, that's the first film school right there. You know what I mean? That's the first film school. And then I think also too, it's like, to make it more localized for us, one of the things that happens is, whether it be in film school or we're not doing a film school, we get totally checked out of our storytelling models. Like for me, I'm always trying to remember the way structurally my grandmother used to tell us stories, or my grandfather used to tell us stories. And that is so unique. The meta of that, the DNA of that is so special, it's so unique to you. But how do we take that thing and transpose that into, inject that into story? And I think the failure of most institutions is that they try to draw that out of you. They try to get you to throw that away so you can take on these very Eurocentric, Aristotelian 3-act structure things, you know what I mean? And that's not, time is so relative. Time, and that's what story is all about anyway. It's about time, right? It's about organizing time. And I think I'm totally with you, Jade, that like, I think, this is kind of interesting that we're having this conversation in this time, that like a lot of those institutions are being challenged right now. Some of them will not exist because they were living high on the hog, and they were living check to check, and they weren't living up to their promises. And a lot of that is it's happening with my kids in school. It's like, man, my kids may never go back to school just because the spot got blown now. Now I'm seeing, man, I can be at home with my kids. We can do this homeschool thing, and we can have fun and like hike, and they can still learn and be smart. Like, why am I sending them to school and paying all this money? And like, no way, it's never, you know what I mean? Why would I go back to that? I think that's what's ultimately going to happen with this institutionalized film making spaces. They have to now, their identity is going to be dependent on each individual storyteller, not like the model that sits above everybody, and how far can you get to touch that model, and that is going to guarantee your success. I think that's all done now. I think it had, and if it's not done, we should try to make it be done, and get focused on, what we all dealing with right now is a certain level of trauma, because we don't have knowledge of self. We don't know who we are. We don't know our story. We don't know our history, and that's what's depleting all of us. That's the reason why we're having a hard time right now. That's the reason why we're struggling, because we've been told a variation of a story that was supposed to include everybody, but only included a few. And so I think now that's going to be the big pivot, is that my grandmother's story is worthy. You know what I mean? It not be institutionalized, and the only person that can institutionalize it is me, because I know the story best. And so I think it's a really interesting time to wrestle. I think it's going to yield really interesting films. I think
so. Yeah.
Yeah.
The flailing that I know I've felt over the past few months, like that I think has been pretty universal, is indicative of so much that I've needed to address, and that I think culturally we've needed to address, like on a personal level, on a societal level, cultural level. There is like this, this sense of flailing at the moment that is gradually being cauterized into something, and I think hopefully into something good. But we were talking about this over the weekend. Like, I never wish a global pandemic on any society, but right. That is not grounds for self-improvement. But the things that we've learned in this time are necessary, again, on a personal level and on a societal level. And those are things that I don't want to lose sight of. Like those are like all of the terror and the discomfort and also the in these months that we've been in our respective homes, just wondering what the next day will bring. Those are things that it's been an opportunity to work through things and to learn and to grow and to also realize what matters, like what matters about what we do, you know? And those are things I don't have the answers to yet. I'm still processing it, but it's given me time to like actually realize how important it is to look inward and find those things. And that's something that for me, I want to make sure I'm not forgetting about once like we have a vaccine and once those institutions open back up again, you know, like I want to make sure like I don't want to go back to normal to a large degree. Like there are certain things, yes, I would love to be able to like go to the movies again. I can't wait. Right. Get me to a theater tomorrow, please. But I also want the movies that I'm seeing to be like, you know, I want to be watching them with the mindset of like what we've been through. And what we've been through changes for everybody. But on a cultural level, I think we're all like realizing we're going through some shit and that's necessary. And we need to not reset once the movie theaters are open again.
Yeah.
Right. Well, shit, you in Texas, they open. Could you
talk? Not near me. They're allowed to be open, but they're not open.
I remember I went to this Michelle and Dago cello concert, and this is like 5 albums in. This is like Conjure Woman or something, and somebody wanted her to play a song from Plantation Lullabies, and she was like, man, I don't play songs from that album anymore. So I'm not gonna even ask us to talk about Ain't Them Body Saints no more. Sorry, all y'all online. Want us to talk about that film? It's not happening. Dave told you he ain't seen it in 7 years, so it's
neither.
It's not going.
I don't remember.
But how often do you rewatch any of your movies? I watched them once. I have a hard time going back. Like one time, I don't like to watch movies I've designed. I always like to tell the story, David, is that when I went to see Old Man and the Gun, because I didn't work on that movie, I was like, I don't know if this is your best movie or if it's just the movie I enjoyed the most watching because I didn't design it, but that was just a joy to watch. I just loved it so much because like I wasn't paying attention to every detail, remembering it through the lens of being a filmmaker on it. I could actually just sit back and it was kind of this gift. I remember feeling such anxiety that I couldn't make that movie. And then it was actually turned into maybe a gift for both of us. I won't speak for you, David, but it was a gift for me to not be able to work with you on that and then be able to sort of appreciate coming back and then being able to watch your film and enjoy you as a filmmaker without having been also a filmmaker on it was sort of this great gift I wasn't expecting.
I get that all the time because you guys get to go make movies and I get to go see them. And it's a joke. I don't know. Like, I know I've texted you both like just screenshots of like your name and credits. Because I'm just like, look, you made this thing.
Yeah, I feel that all the time, Bradford, when I watch your movies. I'm like, man, so good.
Yeah.
One day.
I don't see him.
One day we'll reunite. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to revisit. It's an interesting thing, you know. I just having to go back and watch. I find I'm anxious just watching them for the first time. Like,
I don't remember, you know, enough time goes by that like, I don't remember what scenes are in Ain't Them Body Saints anymore. Like, yeah. We shot a lot and some of it's in the movie, some of it's not. And I cut 10 minutes out after Sundance. Some of that is, you know, maybe was a gain, maybe what wasn't, I can't remember. Like, I don't know.
Matt, I don't know if I've seen that. I think I only saw it at Sundance.
No, you saw it. You saw it, Jade.
Again?
Yeah, you saw it at,
New York.
Yeah, New York.
Right.
But it's definitely like one of those things where like, maybe it's been 7 years since I've seen it. I would give myself like a 10-year rule. I'll probably wait longer than that. Maybe it should be a 20-year rule. Someday I really look forward to watching these movies when I've forgotten everything.
Well, you know what's gonna happen is Criterion, they need to stop fronting. They need to stop fronting and they need to rescan Ain't the Body Saints in 4K and let us redo it.
Can I tell you, I talked to Photochem about it when I was there.
You did, right?
They've got all the negatives. They're like, this is weird. We didn't realize we had these negatives, but we have them all. And I was like, they gave me a price tag, and I was like, let me call you back.
We need to hand that over to whoever's at I got somebody's email in here from Criterion. I hope they're listening. And if anybody knows them, tell them they should put Ain't Them Body Saints on Criterion. And while I'm at it, you need to put Mother of George and Rest of City on there too.
And Ghost Story.
And Ghost Story.
I'm surprised that they didn't.
I would do a, and I would do the 3-set box set. I put Where's Kira on there too because I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah,
one.
there you go. There you go. We got a little bit of time left, and I want to give you guys have two questions that have come to you too, and I want to give time for you to answer them. This question is for you, Jade. You have done both biopics such as I, Tonya and A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. What challenges arise when you are trying to capture specific time eras and recreating iconic moments? Do you find that there are added pressures to get certain elements right? I say this as someone who lives in Pittsburgh and knows how important Mr. Rogers is to the area.
Yeah, I mean, on a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, we were shooting in Pittsburgh with Pittsburgh crew and some people who had worked on Mr. Rogers' show. And it was, of course, really important to get that exactly right. Luckily, there's so much footage, to get that right. But on I, Tonya, which I think I might have spoken about when we spoke over the weekend, what I really loved about Craig is that he would always say, like, it's a movie. Like, don't let yourself be chained to this idea that it's like history, we're making a movie. And at the end of the day, we are. Even when you're making a documentary, you're putting a camera somewhere, you're pointing it, it's a point of view, it's, objectivity. It's like, so we're always making a choice, no matter what, when you're making a film, right? So with I, Tonya, we made a lot of creative stylistic choices. We were challenged with the Olympics because for us to be able to show those Olympics like Lillehammer, we had to show all the advertisements, we had to recreate them exact. That was the only way they would let us do it. Like, it had to be exact, like the signage had to be very exact. So we were really, really trying to get, and there's so much footage of like Tonya Harding, and we really wanted to bring people back to that time. So were we hard on ourselves to get it exactly right? Yes, but also we were allowing for like creative growth and to allow for it to be, not be so tied to history. And I think it's always important to allow for that and not get so, when we made a medieval movie with David, it's medieval, but we were certainly not tied to any kind of historical like representation of like the era at all. It's like, so it's nice to have that freedom, creative freedom to decide what parts you're trying to hit and get right and which parts you're allowing for like creative expression. Because sometimes it's like you're trying to tell a story, you want to make sure that the vision you put forth is like going to express that story. You don't want to tie it back because it's like, this is what her apartment looked like, or this is what it looked like. If no one else in the world has ever seen what that apartment looked like, because it took me like, a month just to track one photo down, like I could probably, and then when I find it, I'm like, oh, this isn't really, it's not really giving the emotion I want. It's okay to throw that out the window. You have to allow yourself, this is an art form, right? It's creative expression. So I think it's important to know which parts you want to get right. Mr. Rogers, everyone knows what that looks like. You want to get that right, but then, his house, there's room. No one's seen his house. You can have some space to be creative there.
Right.
And Tom Hanks is Mr. Rogers. So it's like you already, if we were happy with just like it being exact, we would have just stuck with the documentary and never made a movie, but we're deciding to make a movie. So you're allowing to sort of tell the story and whatever the director and the storytellers want to tell. So it's, you can give yourself some space to be expressive.
But this is for you, David. You have frequently hold on. Some grammatical things here. You have frequent collaborators on your films, Jade Healy being one of them. What kinds of qualities are you looking for your team on set? What is it like bringing in someone new to your core team of frequent collaborators? How do you, as a director, balance all of the energies and perspectives people are bringing on set to get your project where you want it to be?
That's a really good question. Like when you especially bring new people into it. And that's something that I kind of touched on earlier when we were talking about like our first meeting. And you really just try to find, this is like a bad version of this. This is like this most simplistic version, but this is something I heard David Gordon Green say a long, long time ago, back when I went to a Q&A that he did for Undertow, I think. And he was like, it's more important for me to find like a dolly grip who has the same taste in music than I do than someone who like has done, you know, pushed a dolly from Martin Scorsese. Communicate with in terms of like music they like, and they can be like, you know, just think about this song while you're pushing the dolly, as opposed to like, you know, resting on the laurels of their resume. I've always held that to be true. Like I've always like kind of like really tried to like, I'm never like asking people like, give me your iTunes playlist. Like, what do you think of when you read the script? What are you listening to? But I definitely like look for that type of kinship. And sometimes it's a match made in heaven when you bring someone new into that environment. You know, like James and Toby, you guys know them. Like we've made a bunch of movies with them, and we all sort of like get along and just hang out all the time. And we are always like, how can we expand our family? How can we bring new voices into the mix? And we always want to, you know, bring new people into the mix, to bring new voices into our team, into our family, and we want to support people. And like you really do just sort of like go on that gut instinct, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But usually you're you know, I'd say we're usually like the people that we've brought into our creative collective, our creative group, are usually pretty great, and we keep making movies with them. And if they don't fit, we just don't. And that's like, you know, if there are people that we part ways with, there are people that we keep calling. It's definitely like an organic process. But when you click with somebody, when you really click with somebody, you just really, it makes the job easier. And I don't want to like, I'm always like hesitant to like talk about how hard it is to make movies, because again, we're just so lucky that we get to do this. But it's definitely like, if you can make, you know, of all of the millions of decisions you have to make each day, if you can remove one of them because you trust somebody to do exactly what you know they're going to do and what they're going to excel with, that just like makes your life better. Like you can allow someone to just present something to you that you know is going to be great. And you're not babysitting, you're not hand holding, you're just like trusting your collaborators. And that's the environment that we try to create, like that sense of trust. And that's, you know, something that is a work in process. You're always trying to build that from one movie to the next and carry things over and learn from what you've done in the past films. But when you're looking for like, when you're, you know, like for example, Jade, when with the Old Man the Gun schedule shifted and you weren't able to work on that, I had to find a new production designer for the first time ever.
I was like, forced one upon you.
And I was like, how do I do this? And a big part of it was like talking to Jade about who would I work well with. And this was the same, Brad, when I was looking for a DP for Saints, and Jay and Lars were like, I think you and Brad would get along really well. So you start there, you start talking with friends about like who should fill this part, who would be a good member to bring onto the team, who should we invite into the family. And I make it sounds like mafia, inviting into the family. It's not like that at all. But,
there is also, just for clarity, yeah, there hasn't been like any like disasters of people that we just never really ever wanted to. I mean, our family is ever growing, and I want to just take this moment to shout out to Palermo. We love Andrew Palermo and Anel and Dutch. We've got to give Dutch, who's been. I've made so many movies with Dutch that I didn't make with David. He's sort of one of the crossovers. Malgoja also made movies with her without David. Who are we forgetting? Lou. So these are some of our family members.
Here's what it comes down to.
Watching.
Here's what it comes down to. Ultimately, like, do you want to hang out when you rap at the end of the day?
That's it.
Like each other.
Then you're good.
You want to, but not just rap at the end of the day. Also, you want to sit in a van with them for like many hours. That's something I always think about, especially when I know I'm going in for a job interview. It's like, well, like this person's I'm gonna want to sit in a scout van with this director for like hours and hours next to them in some uncomfortable like 16 passenger van and like be okay with that. And then, because, we spend a lot of time in vehicles together in close quarters. So that is the family. It's like you make jokes, you're laughing, and then you also in between that come up with ideas of all the time for the movie. So it's like that the friendship and the collaboration is like so linked. You can't really separate the two when it's, or hopefully that's what you always strive for it to be, that it's like that link.
So it's all of that, all of the above.
Yeah.
Great. All right, y'all. That's a good way to end it. Make movies with your friends.
Yeah, make a
Make
movie.
movies.
Yeah, I think there's someone that asked a question about what advice you'd give for someone trying to get into making movies and make movies with your friends. That's it. Find some other friends who want to make movies. David's producers. He's known Toby and James forever. You know, they started as friends. Now, you know, that's it.
Yeah.
Find some.
Yeah, it all comes to, like, just lead with your heart. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
Well, thank y'all. Thank y'all for giving us your time, your energy.
Of course. Thank you, Brad. Thanks, Jade.
Let's not wait so long for let's not wait for a round table, Brad, to get all together again.
I know. I gotta get out of Mexico first. Once I get out of Mexico, we'll
come find you.
Yes. Wait for me.
Canadian vacation in your future. I
told David, I gotta start doing the thing like this year is for David Lowery. I'm gonna wait for David.
Yeah, let's line up on that.
Let's line it up. We gotta bring it back, and we'll make Heaven's Gate that next time.
Yes.
Remake.
Okay. You
All
heard it here first.
The whole thing. The whole
been announced.
The whole thing.
If anyone from Variety or Deadline's listening, it's been announced.
But before we go, we have to. I want to thank Aaron, Doug, Maria, Matthew, everybody who puts these roundtables together. Thank you so much for providing all of us these moments to reflect and listen, watch, learn. We look forward to having everybody who's on, watching, listening. Look forward to having you back for the next one. And good luck, y'all, with Peter Pan. I hope everything is popping soon.
Good luck in Mexico.
We get back to work.
Thank you. Yeah, safely.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, y'all be well.
Have a good night.
All right, y'all too. Peace.
Bye.
Later.